What is going on? Welcome back to Trending Stocks. Today we're going to talk about T2. I'm going to go over some of the data points, what's been coming out from the company, and whether right now is a good time to buy or not. Before I get into any of that, make sure to hit that thumbs up and subscribe. Always greatly appreciate that. And with that said, let's get right to it. So currently it is up 3.26%. A lot of volatility, as you can tell, based on the intraday. So $5.12 is the low, $5.49 is the high. And when it comes to volume, rather low. So 313,000 shares being traded, 1.2 million is the average. So I think the hype after the whole reverse stock split is starting to diminish. As far as any recent news, there hasn't been any SEC filings. Well, there was an 8K but about this news, and it says T2 announces amendment and extension of CRG term loan agreement. So ultimately, it does look like the maturity date is changing from December 31st, 24 to December 31st, 2025, and also is going to be reducing the minimum cash covenant from 5 million to 500,000, which I do feel is very good for the company. You do see some people talking on how this is going to be very good and is a signal that they're not going to be filing bankruptcy. It's kind of completely unrelated, even though that 500,000 minimum is good. And just so you are all aware, that basically means that they need to have at least 500,000 in cash at any one time to satisfy the agreement. So it's good to have obviously less cash versus the 5 million, because based on the last earnings, they stated that they had around 23.5 million in cash and cash equivalents. But still, it doesn't mean bankruptcy, because they are burning through a ton of money, as I brought up in the past. So cash from operations, negative 51.56 million. So that is not necessarily the best. And I'm going to touch on all this in a second, but some updates. When it comes to options, still no change. So this is very abnormal. Normally it takes about 2 to 3 days, maybe a little bit less, for market makers to create new chains. But as it stands, still nothing. And of course, every broker does things differently. So they might adjust the actual number of shares or the actual strike price, but they do make a custom chain for you where you can essentially only sell it or hold it. You can't add to your position. So have they made those for you yet? And similarly, when it comes down to shorting, there still is a lot of kind of weirdness happening. And when it comes down to Ortex, after a reverse stock split, it does typically take them about 2 days for them to adjust. But ever since the reverse stock split, still nothing. So it does show still 0 shares have changed, but cost to borrow average, or cost to borrow in general, is still going. So that does mean that there is shorting happening. We just don't know the gravity of it and how severe it is or not. Cost to borrow average though is 53.81. So ultimately, for us to find out about shorts, we just have to wait until the actual NASDAQ does declare it, most likely in the next couple days. And so there's only 2 times per month they do disclose the true amount of shares being shorted. So most likely in roughly about 2 more days, so probably Thursday, we'll be able to find out what the true amount of shares being shorted is. And when it comes down to Thursday, that also does mark the 10th consecutive day for it being above $1. So who knows, maybe NASDAQ compliance might be coming down the pipeline fairly soon. And once that is announced, that definitely should cause a nice little bump up in the stock price. My own opinion, of course, not a financial advisor. And when it comes down to it though, the NASDAQ does have its discretion to do anywhere from 10 to 20 consecutive business days. So once again, we might not find out this week, could be next week, or just who knows. It's up to the NASDAQ to determine the timeline, and that's based on their risks that they do see. One thing I just wanted to share with you, based on the latest updated Morningstar report post-split, it does show 21.24 as the fair market value for T2, and so that's factoring their assets. So of course, it's obviously at a significant discount because essentially it is burning through quite a lot of cash, as I've signaled, and plus, based on the last earnings, they kind of cut their future revenue from 3.6 to 2.4 million, if I remember correctly. So once again, it wasn't necessarily the best, and it looks like, based on their website, they are hiring for a ton of positions. So this will all equate to more and more expenses. So going back over here, that is just going to kill their cash from operations, just burn through so much more. So as far as right now, whether I would buy or not, most likely not, even though there could be some nice spikes up, at least in the foreseeable future, because of either NASDAQ compliance news or something else that might come out from the company. I do feel, based on what they said during their recent earnings, there was a lot of red flags because they did a 1-for-100 reverse stock split just to stay on the NASDAQ. especially just for the purposes, essentially, of just raising capital. Because any company going down to OTC, it is very difficult for them to get liquidity and just capital and raise capital. So this is why a lot of companies would rather do a very large reverse stock split, but stay on the NASDAQ just so they have access to more funding. So I think there's a little bit more pain in T2's foreseeable future. And as it stands, even though it is going up a good amount today, so 3.26, based on the technicals, it is between this R1 and the R2. I wouldn't really consider it kind of within that range though, because 536 was a strong resistance, but didn't really confirm as of right now that it's above it. So who knows, it might be trading between the P and the R1. So $5.23 is a very strong support. And then vice versa, 536 and 544 are some resistance points that you need to watch for. So like I said, I do feel that this might be obviously dragged down a little bit more, but who knows? It's all about the short-term, long-term game. If you do believe in T2, then take advantage of these discounted prices. But if you're trying to catch the bottom, exactly what I've been kind of explaining, then it might not be essentially in as of right now. But once again, I could be wrong. Let me know your thoughts on all of this in the comments below. Don't forget to hit that thumbs up and subscribe. Always greatly appreciate that. And one final thing, even though T2 goes up, down, sideways, all over the place, take advantage of promos such as this. So sign up for an account with Moo, throw $100 at it, and you get 5 free stocks. Each stock is valued up to $2,000. So take advantage of this. Link in the description below and also the comments. With all that said, I appreciate all of you watching.